A protein is really funny. It's a macronutrient that is more controversial or as controversial as religion. And it wasn't that way when I started in this 20 years ago. With the rise of social media and the rise of input of different things like influential bloggers or influencers, that really changed everything. So it's really been much different nowadays than it was before. Let me tell you protein. So we're going to talk about protein. Now, protein is made up of 20 different amino acids, 9 of which are essential. And that means that we must eat them from the diet. So we must get these essential amino acids from the diet. Why is protein important? Protein is important for our architecture, for our foundation. It is important for bone health, for skin, for hair, for neurotransmitters. The amino acid phenylalanine is a precursor for dopamine, tryptophan for serotonin. Again, all of these individual amino acids, which make up protein, do various things. And what is so fascinating is that we don't actually eat for protein. We do eat for these various amino acids. The current recommendation is around 0.37 grams per pound. So if you are a 115-pound woman, that would mean your minimum requirement for dietary protein would be 45 grams. Mm-hmm. That is way too low. And these recommendations have not been updated since the 60s, which is fascinating that we've had such an influx of science and really good data, yet the recommendations have not changed. What is much more valuable for people is to have double the RDA, and that would be closer to 1.6 grams per kg. So that's 0.7 grams per pound. And when you do that, what happens is you meet the needs of skeletal muscle, you meet the needs of organ systems, you decrease hunger, you decrease your dependency on other kinds of foods, and it really allows you to maintain optimal body composition.
Okay, so exercise, diet. What about the mental health aspect? Does that play a role in any of this? And if so, how much would you say?
Well, having there's two parts to that. Certainly exercise. We know that exercise influences brain function. Exercise, because you have healthy skeletal muscle and you are training skeletal muscle, these skeletal muscle, the various muscles in your body release these myokines. And these myokines like cathepsin B or irisin or BDNF, they all have impact on mood and brain function. Mm. And BDNF helps with brain neurogenesis, helps with memory. These are aspects where we know that regular physical activity helps with anxiety, helps with depression. And it's not just the action of endorphins, it is the action of these myokines. And that is, there's a new emerging evidence over time that we're going to hear more about that, because what we typically think about muscle and exercise is that we think about the endorphins. We think about, the stress hormones, which in this case would be positive. But the other aspect is, again, these myokines that play a role in the influence on the brain. And that's really, really cool. The other side note of this, we'll just take it one step that is maybe a little bit more nebulous or out there, is that skeletal muscle is a currency. We can agree that it is the site for glucose metabolism. We can agree that it is really the site for fatty acid oxidation, all of these things. But it is an organ system, and it's the only organ system in which you have direct control over. Meaning, you cannot go exercise your liver or even your heart. You cannot say, I want my heart to beat, 125 beats a minute. With skeletal muscle, you can say, I'm going to raise my left hand. I'm going to contract my bicep. I'm going to do a squat. You have direct control over this endocrine system. And what does that mean? That means that the person that you have to become, the actions that you have to take, the habits that are required of you to earn this metabolic currency will also make you a stronger, more resilient, more anti-fragile human. And that's one part of why skeletal muscle is so important. Above and beyond, if we were just going to talk science, fine. But we don't just live in this science bubble. We do live in a world where we interface. And part of that interface, there is a mental aspect to that interface. And then if you want to say nutrition and you want to talk about dietary protein, will dietary protein make you in a better mood? No, probably not. Will it allow you to augment your willpower so that you stay on your plan versus eating donuts or cake or having cravings? It will. And what does that do? It allows you to maintain the integrity within yourself. When you set out on a plan, you say you're going to do this thing, and you have all these other things pulling at you, like your cravings or blood sugar regulation. You then take an action where I'm just going to eat that cookie, or I'm just going to eat that donut that is down there. The way in which these amino acids work, they will help augment that willpower.
And in terms of the people that are, you've looked at from your perspective, treating various clients along this journey, have you found that the world in which we live in is so now we have so much access to so much information, and that's great. That's super positive about, how we're affecting our bodies and the changes that we can make, which are positive. But we also live with this sort of low grade stress all of the time. And many people, especially driven professionals, will be subject to that all of the time. Is there an argument as well to say we need to make time to switch off? We need time just to focus on self-care?
Oh, yeah. Part of my practice, so I still see patients, and my patient population, they're entrepreneurs. I take care of some of the best, most successful entrepreneurs in the world. And I will tell you, they have very specific ways about them. And in fact, I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say, you show me your habits and what you do, and I will be able to tell you where you are on your entrepreneurial journey. You show me your habits, you show me what your day looks like, and I will tell you where you are on your entrepreneurial journey. The best of the best, it is non-negotiable. Early on in a entrepreneur or business owner's behavior is they are working all night. They are pushing early mornings, late nights, and they do not have time for exercise. They do not have time to diet. They do not have time for any self-care. This is a rookie mistake. Yeah. The best entrepreneur, and here's why, because there's a predictable crash and burn that happens every single time. They'll do this next big sale. They'll do this next big launch. And as high as they go is as low as they go. They will then spend another month trying to recover to get back up to baseline. I see this all the time. The seasoned entrepreneur is extremely disciplined. It is an absolute non-negotiable, whether they are training early in the morning or when they get off a flight, they have their rituals, they go right to the gym. They are very structured on their food. Their food is not chaotic. I could ask any one of my entrepreneurs, the real successful ones, you're talking $200 million or more successful. I could call them up and ask them what they ate 2 weeks ago for lunch, and they would be able to tell me.
Is that because it's ingrained in them, this pattern of behavior thing? Is that if you know what you're, like you say, you have this sort of routine that you call on, and you don't change those variables. There are other things in your life that will cause for you to turn right or to turn left, but those things are the things that they can control, right? Is that what it's all about? It's all about controlling the process better.
Yeah, it's just they recognize the importance. They know that as they are only going to ever be able to go as high as their health. And because they care about business and because they care about what they are doing in the world, they know that as high and as successful as they're ever going to be is going to be their ability to keep up.
Okay. So normally at this point, I'd ask you
do they have habits? Yes.
Yeah. Normally at this point, I'd ask you for a performance tip for people for better everyday life so that they can perform better every day. But it feels like the better thing to ask is, what are those people doing 200 million up that the rest of us aren't every single day, which is leading to success and ultimately performance?
They do a few things. And I will say that there's one perspective piece I'd love to add, because I think that that's the benefit of being a clinician who sees patients, is that over time, a good clinician can recognize patterns of disease, but an effective physician recognizes patterns of people. And I think if you recognize patterns of people, there's a lot to be learned from that. And one of the things that I've noticed of the most successful people in the world is they're very neutral. Going into any big speaking event, any big negotiation, any big anything, they actually are pretty neutral, because following the big event or the big deal, for normal people, those are moments of weaknesses. At the pinnacle, when you are doing everything right and you're having a ton of success, because you're on this kind of dopamine high, this is a point of vulnerability. And after it, an individual will go as high as they went is as low as they go. So you don't go to baseline, you go actually much lower. And I think that these people recognize it very early on. And so they are neutral going into any kind of major thing. They have a level of neutrality. So while the rest of us are trying to catch up and, oh my gosh, that big thing or everything is this big deal, it's not like that for them. And so they don't fall off their plan. They're not losing sleep the night before. They're not, starting to go have a bunch of drinks, or I just did this great big keynote and now I'm going to go eat a bunch of cake. They're very consistent. And what's so consistent is their emotional control. And they groom themselves in a way where it's not actually effort. So it becomes second nature. It's not this continued effort of forcing a neutral mind. It is something that just exists and it becomes a way of life. And those individuals, it allows them to maintain consistency over decades. They all train. They all do some kind of resistance exercise. They all have a consistent nutrition plan, all of them. They all have great doctors on their team. They are not out there, and they outsource, right? So my patients are very good about doing the things that they need to do. Here's your blood work. We're going to do this. We're going to do your blood work in another 6 months. It's not, and they've become very good at it. It's not secondary. They don't wait for the wheels to fall off the bus.
And what I guess is your greatest success story to date? Which is the patient that you're perhaps most proud of? I know there's data protection involved here, but if you could draw on one experience which has really consolidated all of this learning for you, which would it be?
I mean, there's a lot of different patients depending on what it is that they were looking to do. But there's one patient that really, it was profound, her impact. So she was a healthcare professional. She was a professional woman working a lot of hours, and she had autoimmune disease. So she had, I think that she had, I don't know, maybe if it was lupus or rheumatic arthritis. She just had a whole host of pretty significant autoimmune disease and was on a lot of heavy drugs for it. She had struggled to lose weight. She did every diet under the sun. And when she started working with me, she ended up losing 60 pounds and was able to cut back nearly all her medication. Inflammatory markers went down, everything. And she just was finally ready. She was ready to be less distracted. One of the reasons why people don't do well is they're very distracted. Mm. And when individuals are very distracted, they don't stick to a plan. And, you'd mentioned earlier, what's all this? There's so much information out there. Yes. And that information does one thing. It doesn't provide good information. It provides distraction. What becomes very critical is to vet the information that you're hearing, understand that you are going to execute on a plan, put on the blinders, and not abandon ship, and really focus on that key action. So if someone is listening to this and they're like, well, what are the practical things? How to get started? I would say, here's what it's going to be. You're going to start with 1 gram per pound of protein for your ideal body weight. So if you are 150 pounds and you want to be 130 pounds, get 130 grams of protein. Super simple. That first and that last meal of the day should have 40 to 50 grams of protein. The middle meal, I don't care. Prioritize protein first. You'll augment your willpower. You'll protect skeletal muscle. If you want to have carbohydrates, you should earn them. Carbohydrates should not be more than 50 grams of carbs per meal, depending on what your carbohydrate tolerance is. Super easy. Don't have to overcomplicate it. Be consistent. You're not going to the grocery store and then figuring out what you're going to do. We're not doing any of that. You are knowing exactly what you are going to be getting, and you are prepping and you are planning, just as you do for your podcast, just as you do for your work. This is just as equally as important. So you do that, super easy. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to add in resistance exercise 3 days a week. There's no excuse not to do it. It's a non-negotiable, because you know that when you are exercising, you are not training to be good at exercise. You are exercising to be good at life. You are doing resistance training to protect your brain. You are doing resistance training because you are cultivating your character in a way that may not be easy, but is challenging. And that is a life worth of meaning. So you do those things, and I think that you're going to be ahead of the pack. Ahead of the pack by 98%.
That's great advice. It's absolutely fantastic. Gabrielle, thank you so much. It's been really fascinating speaking to you.
Thank you for having me.